how people perceive the information matters almost more than the information itself. The reason I'm so big on this evidence is because that's the frame that people consume your message in. If I have a book that says how to market a book and it has 10 reviews on Amazon, do I need to consume the book? No, I already know the book sucks because I have evidence that the book sucks. I have visual proof that everything you're saying is not true or that you aren't even doing it. I want people to have the evidence so that when they speak about something, they can be confident about it.
Alex Hormozi, it's great to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome, man.
Nice to be here.
I heard a stat, and I just need to confirm if this is true, man. Your great-great-grandfather had 400 children. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Wow. Can you share a little more about your background and where you come from and what your great-grandfather did?
Yeah, so he was from the Qajar dynasty, which was the one that preceded the Shah in Iran. And so mind you, that was not with one woman, obviously. And he had the means to support 400 kids. Good for him. But yeah, I'm Iranian. And he was one of the last Persian bros who was leading the place. And then he had a kid, one of those 400, and one of those 400 had 19 kids. And one of those 19 kids was my grandfather. And then that guy had 2 kids. And one of those was my dad. And then there's me.
I know you don't have children yet, and I think that's
No.
still up in the air. Although you've made lots and lots of money, you do not want to give any of that to your potential future kids. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I didn't get anything from the emperor of the Qajar dynasty. So, I mean, like, why should they? No, I mean, I just think that okay, so you play it out like micro, macro, right? So like from a macro perspective, you multiply out generations and like, it doesn't matter how much wealth you have, it's going to get spread in almost nothing, which is the situation I'm in direct correlation with that. And the other is on the micro level. I think wealth that is given is not a gift. I think it's a curse. And I think it ends up hurting more people than it does helping, because like a lot of meaning in life comes from struggle and work and who we become in the face of stress and hardship. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is the work works on you more than you work on it. And so like to rob someone of the ability to have struggle in their life might rob them from becoming the person they ultimately should or would want to become. And so I think if I have the desire to have my kids become certain types of people, then I want to set up the conditions so that they become that. If you have a kid, you don't want, like, no one's like, man, I just want my kid to be rich. Like, no one thinks that. They want their kids to be good people. And so it's like, if you want good kids to be good people, then set up the conditions that create a good person. And that doesn't come from easy times, not necessarily.
Are you guys going to have kids?
Don't know. Not yes, not no.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, Layla's young. I'm 33. Like we got
plenty of time.
Yeah.
I think it's just a fascinating way to view it, and I think it's a really mature way when it comes to, because you're so right. I mean, you think about how you've built what you've built. It didn't come from easy times. It comes from being willing to grind through it, and that is actually a gift, even though it doesn't always feel like it in the moment.
And I think reframing reality and having more of those as basically tools in your skill set to go through hard times and reframing them as times that make you harder. And if that's the ultimate goal, then like, why would we be upset about it? It's like a hard workout being like, man, this workout's hard. It's like, yeah, but it's making me harder as a person. And so that's what I want. And so then it's like, I don't resent the workout anymore. I think it is just a requisite for where I want to go.
You have one of my favorite quotes ever when it comes to confidence. And I use it a lot when people ask me about imposter syndrome. Perhaps they've gotten promoted early or earlier than they think, even though they went for a job. And the quote, and I'd love for you to expand, is you don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by having a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are, outwork your self-doubt. When someone comes to you with imposter syndrome or not fully sure of themselves, what do you say to them?
It's really reasonable that you'd feel this way. Maybe you shouldn't be confident. Because that's the thing is, it's like, if we were to zoom in, like, what does the word confidence mean? Like, let's look at statistics, right? People are like, what is our confidence in this statistic? And so they have evidence, they have data to support how confident they are in whatever the stat is, right? And so if we are confident in something, then it means that we believe we have a high probability of achieving whatever the prediction is, right? So like, how strong is the prediction we have? Well, how do you make predictions? You usually use a basis of data. And so if our past is the data set that we have, then we can be like, if I've worked out every day for 4 years, and then somebody comes up to me and is like, dude, you're just so like confident about working out, or it just seems like you're so certain. Like, how are you so motivated? All this stuff. It's like, I'm pretty confident I'm going to go to the gym because I have gone to the gym every day for 4 years. I think confidence, if you're wearing it, doesn't feel like confidence. It feels obvious. And I think that's the big difference. Because I remember that tweet got taken from multiple different instances and then glued together. So the outwork yourself doubt came from a small speaking event that Layla and I did. And someone said, how do you guys, because I just presented all the stuff on sales and building sales teams. And they were like, how are you so confident? Like, you seem so certain about this stuff. And I was like, and it was weird because I don't come from the personal development world. So this was like all new to me. And I kind of like, I was like, I don't know. This is just what it is. This is how you build and scale sales teams. I know this because I've done it. Like, this is it. I don't need to beat my chest and look in the mirror and be like, really, like, I'm going to crush this speech today. It was just because like I was talking about stuff I knew, and I knew it because I had done it. And so if someone isn't confident, it might be right for them to be unconfident. Now, the flip side is, and this is what I would add to answer that person, not tongue in cheek, if somebody actually did come to me, I would say, what would you require someone to have done for you to say it would be reasonable for them to talk about this subject? And if they listed out these stats, and then I said, okay, do you match that? Or do you exceed that? Now, if they said, I do kind of match that and exceed that, then I'm like, then just get out of your own way, man. Just talk about what you know. And if you feel like you don't know it, then don't say it. And on the flip side, if they're like, no, I don't match that, then I'm like, then get off the fucking stage. Go back in the trenches, go do the reps. And then when you come back, you will feel confident because you will have, quote, outworked yourself out, which is really giving yourself undeniable proof. Because like, I don't like the chest beating thing. If you are confident without data, you're delusional. Like, you're a faker.
Yeah.
I just think it's fake. You're either faking it or you're copy pasting someone else's experience. Because otherwise, where would you get the data from? Like, what you're saying, where would you get it from? You get it from somebody else that you heard, which means you're irrelevant. Like, they probably said it better because they did it. So just like stop and go do your own thing.
How was it for you at the beginning? So before, because I've seen all the stories of when you were poor, had nothing, meet your wife, right? You're living with her parents, all this stuff. So there was a time that wasn't that long ago, actually, where you had none of this stuff, none of this fame and fortune. What were you like at the beginning of that?
Well, to give the full context there, I had 6 gyms when I met Layla.
Okay.
So I was reasonably successful. I then lost it all.
Okay. So you messed it up.
Key point. So I lost it all, but I still had the skills, which is why I'm a big proponent of having skills. And I knew, so I sold the gym successfully, and then I wanted to do this new model. The new model didn't work, or I had to have some tweaks on it. And so the evidence that I had, that like, did I have evidence that I knew how to generate leads? Yes. Did I have evidence I knew how to sell? Yes. Did I know evidence that like I knew that this promotion would work? Yes. Did I know that I tested in multiple markets? Yes. And so I was relatively confident, despite the fact that it was an insane risk, which, I mean, like, people see my stuff now, and believe me, it still took all that I had from a balls perspective to put $100,000 on a credit card when I had $1,000 in my bank account. But it was also because I was used to making $100,000 a month, and I was very confident that we would make it again. And so, like, it was a risk, but I'm not a moron. You know what I mean? And so it makes a dramatic story, but at the same degree, like, the month before that, I'd done $100,000 in sales too. I just hadn't been able to collect on it because the processor didn't process the money. And so that's the thing. It's like, if I had put $100,000 on a credit card, having $1,000 in my bank account, having never done whatever this new business was, needing to make $100,000 in the first month of a brand new thing with no experience, that would be stupid. Like, to such a large degree that, like, the likelihood of success would be really low. I had evidence that I had 6-figure months, many months before that, right? It was just that I had lost everything. And then I had gone all in on this next launch, crushed the launch, and then not gotten the money for it. And then because I was supposed to have had that extra $100,000 to float this next one, 6 guys had already quit their jobs to start. So I was confident enough to launch 6 gyms the next month, but I didn't have the money. So that was where the risk came from. But I would say that, like, a lot of the stuff that's happened, and I'm going to go on a little tangent here, but I think it'll maybe be
Sure.
useful. Most of the quote status and asking to speak on stuff has come always after the fact. So I got asked to speak about launching gyms after I'd already launched a bunch of gyms. And I was just talking to somebody. He's like, dude, you should speak at my event. He's like, I don't ever do this, but like, you would be great. And I was like, I don't. I was like, dude, I'm just a gym owner, man. And he was like, no, I want to have some brick and mortar. This is mostly online, so it'd be cool to show that. I was like, all right. And so I just, and it was weird because I do remember this, and this is might be an interesting point. It's like when I'd always been nervous to speak when I was in school. Like you have like a presentation or a project or whatever. I was always like really nervous to talk. But for the first time in my life, when I got up in front of it was like a 1,500 person audience. Like I was nervous in high school. And this is the first time I talked, it was 1,500 people. And I remember not being nervous at all. And I was like, why is that? And I was like, I'm just talking about what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was it. And so like the slides that I had, I was like, well, this is the ad I ran. And this was the lead cost. And this is how we follow up with leads. And this is how many people scheduled. This is how many people showed. This is how many sales we made. And this is how I launched the last however many gyms that I've done. And then everyone went fucking nuts. And I was like, this is so weird. And so it was like, it was weird for me. And so a lot of times I prefer to be on the opposite side of it, which is like, I don't want to talk about hitting 1 billion until we're at 1 billion. I had someone comment being like, oh, you don't know how to hit 1 billion yet. I was like, well, I have a pretty decent idea of what I'm going to do. I was like, but I'm not going to say I know it until I've been there. I can talk about crossing 9 figures because I know, because I've been there. And so it's just like, I prefer to talk about it that way, mostly because maybe I'm just a big pansy and I can't front anything. And I feel so insecure about anything unless I have absolute proof that I can stand by it. Because I call, well, like my closest friend, Dr. Kashi, we call it the podcast test, which is like, if someone drills down on this in a podcast, what are you going to say? And so for me, the easiest thing to always have is just a big fucking stack of proof. They're like, I don't think you're good at sales. I'm like, okay. Like, I don't know what good at sales means. Closed 4,000 of them. I was like, I don't know if that makes me good or bad. I've done a lot of it. And I'll say, this is what's worked for me. And if it helps you, awesome. If it doesn't, no worries. Because it's not going to change the data.
So for that person that hasn't done it, do you just have to act and do your way into gaining the confidence? So when in doubt, take action, start before you're ready, get going to get good, all of those types of things. Is that what you're thinking?
So I actually think you need to chunk down. So
Okay.
what it is like, you're not going to, so if you're like, I want to get started in sales, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that's the thing. Well, there are lots of things that are required to be successful in sales that you might have evidence to be good at. Are you good at communicating? Can you show up on time? Are you good at doing repetitive tasks? How can you handle rejection? These are all things that you could test before you get into sales.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd say, I think I'm going to be good at sales because I have this data. And so I think this is a good match for me as a career path. Now, if you're like, I hate rejection, I can't show up on time, I'm super like, I hate talking to people every day, and rejection crushes my soul, sales might not be the career for you. And so it's just like, what are the micro things that are like, again, if you were to make the perfect salesperson who had zero experience, but you thought you'd have a really high prediction that they would be good at sales, what would you make them do? I'd make them do all these things. Cool, then do that.
Speaking of sales, I was a college athlete, played a little bit after college football, and then a lot of guys who have no idea, no plan because I only wanted to play sports, got a job in sales. And I never sold a thing in my life. But luckily had a guy take a chance on me, and then it went extremely well for 12 years, and now I do this full time. But that I love talking sales because that was my first real job, and it felt not exactly like playing football in front of a lot of people, but there are some elements that felt pretty good when you get wins. I'm curious, Alex, to hear about like your overall philosophy when it comes to the profession and the art of selling. How, like at a high level, before we drill down, how do you feel and what do you think about selling?
I mean, I love selling. And as a side note to your point, like if it felt a lot like football and like the sports that you were playing, then it's like I had a lot of transferable skills. Right. And so although you had never quote sold before, you had done maybe 80% of the things that are required to be successful in sales. And then you just had to learn the 20% mechanics. Yeah. And then that made you a good salesman. Right. Yeah. And so for me, I think sales comes down to clear communication and conviction. Because fundamentally, like if you really believe in the thing, then you don't have an issue with rejection because you feel like you're trying to help the person.
Yep.
right? Now, a lot of times, and this is like, let's talk real. A lot of times people they get a job and they were promised things great, and then they get in and then they find out that there's actually like other problems with the thing, right? Well, what do? Like, you still need to eat, right? And so as a salesperson, you have to set clear expectations. And honestly, what I have found in most of my selling experience is that the more honest you are, the more you still end up selling, because it's so counter what salespeople do that people are like, wow, I can trust this guy. One of the biggest things I found out on accident was how to sell supplements. And it happened when I ran out of product one day, right? So I ran out of fish oil. And so somebody was coming in and I had sold her friend fish oil. And then she was next later in the day because I would do weigh-ins, I would stack them all. And I was like, okay, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, what about the fish oil? My friend got fish oil. And I was like, oh, I don't have any fish oil. And she was like, ah. I was like, okay. And I wrote it down. I was like, this is the one you should get. Go to this store. You'll like, it's not ideal, but this will be great. And she was like, okay. And then she was like, well, what else do I need? And I was like, whoa. Because I referred business away, she was like, oh, I'll take all of your recommendations now. And so then I learned that I was like, oh, this whole fear I had around like just like trying to help, keeping the customer at the center of the conversation, keeping the relationship first long term is ultimately how you sell the most people. Like, all you have to do is just measure on a longer time horizon. And so I think that big kind of awakening, and I stumbled into a lot of these things. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't find out on purpose. I didn't go to any sales training stuff until I already had 6 gyms. I didn't even know that sales training existed.
You mentioned a lot that you're playing the long game. With $100 million offers, your book, one of your books, you priced the Kindle version very low. And I've heard and read that you've done this because it's not about the short-term money from the book. It's about the long-term. Maybe 5 years from now, somebody who reads that's a business that you acquire or you work with that person. I just love the thought of being a long game player. I feel like the people who sustain excellence over time think this way. What's your overall thought process on playing the long game?
I think it's being better at being greedy. Like, you get more, you just measure over a longer time horizon. It's funny because even the whole like givers thing, it's like givers have just learned a better way to be greedy. You get more by giving first. It's literally like having a loss leader in business. It's just having a loss leader in life, is that you choose to give to everybody, and a certain percentage of those people will give you something back. And the thing that you can't quantify is how valuable the thing they give back to you is, but you can quantify what you give to them. And so more times than not, you get more back than you give. And even if you got back fewer times, you will still get more back. So we're talking about frequency versus intensity. You know what I mean? In terms of how much you get. So like for the book thing, for example, me getting 30 cents or 70 cents from Amazon when, an ebook sells, I would have to sell a tremendous amount of ebooks in order to make any money from it, right? But the thing is that one good deal that comes from the book makes more than 99.999% of books. So like, why would I play that game? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so
different purpose. Like, it feels like though you have developed the skill, which a lot of people have not, of delayed gratification.
Sure. And maybe like we could go back to like, maybe in fitness it's delayed gratification. But then again, I also know tons of short-term thinkers in fitness. So like, I don't know how much that transfers, and I'm just maybe ascribing a reason to it. But I think the real is that the longer I wait for things to happen, the more rewarded I am for waiting. And so that behavior has been positively reinforced over and over again. And the longer I wait, the more I am reinforced for doing so. And so then what happens, it becomes this kind of like delayed game, because what happens, you start winning along the way, right? And so I think a really helpful thing to define, and this like changed my life, was defining patience. So I am not a patient person by my character, like at least how I feel. Like, I constantly want things to happen faster. I constantly compare my progress to where I think I should be based on an arbitrary thing, which will always be 25% further than wherever I am right now. I should be there. I must. I need to. Why are we not? But when I define patience not as how I felt, by simply what you do in the meantime. Like, if you say, hey, be patient, that's not helpful for someone because it means nothing. Like right now, you and I are being patient for the stock market investments that you've made right now. for some deals that you have in the pipeline that you're not pushing, but you think they might come to fruition, for a split test that you're running on one of your websites. Like, you're being patient while we're on this podcast right now. But like, you're not really being patient. You're just keeping busy. You're doing something in the meantime. And so when I defined patience that way, it made it operational for me. So when I know, or I feel very confident that we're going to be able to hit 1 billion on some timeline. And so between now and then, it's just figuring out what to do in the meantime. And part of that is like, I love writing. Writing is a terrible way to make money in general. I got a writing scholarship in college. So I've liked it for a long time. And so this almost just gives me an excuse to write and draw about the thing that I like, which is business. And I almost justify it or rationalize it because I just say, okay, cool, I'm gonna put this out there, and then like maybe we'll get a deal from it, and it'll make it all back. But the real thing is kind of like software programmers. If you talk to them, like, what do you want out of the software? They just say one thing. They just say, I just want people to use it. And it's kind of the same thing with the book. It's like, I just want people to read it. I just want people to use it and get better from it. Because I'm going to die. No one's going to remember me. My great-grandfather was emperor of whatever, and no one here has ever heard of him. And he fucking killed life. So what? And I'm like, he's related to me, and I barely know anything about him. And that's like, what, five generations? It's nothing. So whatever I do is going to amount to nothing. And so I just think of it as everything that we have is because of some human in the past that figured something out for us. And like, we don't know their names, but they helped us. And so like, for me, that is a noble pursuit that I'm willing to dedicate a life to, at least in my life.
Consistency is another big word. You published work online, a podcast, right? Everything that you've done. And there was a big portion of the beginning of that where I don't think anyone ever heard of you or listened to it or watched it, or very little. And then all of a sudden, at least to the outside world, not to you, but all of a sudden you're everywhere. Everyone's seeing you everywhere. What was that like at the beginning stages, and then the transition point? And it's still, I guess, technically happening, but the transition point, baby, to where is that? Yeah,
so we're still early,
but very early though. I think you said for years from the videos I watched, years and years you did it, and like nobody listened, nobody paid attention. Yet you kept at it, you stayed consistent, kept going, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, there's probably a variety of reasons, you're everywhere. Can you walk me through your stages of being willing to be consistent, and then seeing it how it's paying off for you now?
Yeah, so I'll give 3 maybe insights off of 6 years of podcasts. So I started July of 16 was my first podcast. And I think it was called like the Gym Secrets podcast, because that's what it was called then. And this is right as I was starting Gym Launch. And I had gym owners who were in my world. And so I wanted to just kind of create, this is my lattice work of thinking about how we grow gyms, right? Now, at that point, I already had 6 gyms and had sold them and had done 30 turnarounds. So like, I had evidence that I knew what I was talking about, just for context. And so I talked about just very like, here's how you fix churn. Here's how you sell membership. Here's how you deal with like the spouse isn't there objection. Here's how you can get someone to commit to 3 days a week on your off hours so that you can increase the capacity of your facility. Like, here's how to arrange your lobby so that you can increase your sales percentage. Like, here's how you can weave in reviews and test it. Like, I mean, just all the shit that you do to run a business. So number one, the reason I was able to stay consistent with it was because it was easy for me to do, because I always tried to interweave it in my normal work schedule. And so for me, it was like twice a week, I would go live in a Facebook group, and I'd get questions from all the licensees of like whatever the issue was. And if I saw a recurring issue, that would be the topic that I would talk about. So it was very responsive for me, and I already knew the answer to the question, and I just would dive deep on it for X period of time. And sometimes I'd get riled up and I would do one impromptu because someone was like, man, all these leads are broke. And then I would just lose my shit on camera about how they were selling out of their own wallet and they should be trying to help people, blah, blah. And so that was insight. Number one is that it had to be natural and easy for me to do, to work within my current kind of constraints. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what led to the consistency. The 2 things that led to the breakthrough at year 4.5 was, number one, is I rebranded the podcast to The Game. Because you can imagine how many people are like, oh, you got to listen to this podcast called Gym Secrets. Doesn't matter what the episode's about. You're not going to listen to it unless you own a gym. Like, it's just like, why would you listen to it? And the second one, or I guess this is insight. This is the third insight, but the second of the breakthroughs, was that I started asking people to share it. That was it. Those are the three things that changed. But the actual format itself has not really changed. I stopped talking about gym specific, gym only in September of 19. So that was when I said, I'm not going to talk about gym stuff anymore. I'm just going to talk about general business. And then literally that month, like the next month it grew, and the next month it grew, and the next month it grew. And then when I started saying, hey, if you're enjoying this podcast, like I don't run ads, I don't do anything, like just share it with a friend. That was like the next increment of growth. But that was it. You know what I mean? I mean, I didn't make content anywhere else besides my podcast. And I stayed for 4.5 or whatever it was, 4.5 years at 2,000 downloads a month.
Wow.
And I feel really confident that the content in there is still good. But I didn't package it for mass consumption. And that's probably one of the biggest lessons I had over the last 2 years growing my quote personal brand, whatever you want to call it, is that I've learned a lot about packaging. And so like when you're making like a short or you're making a tweet or you're making an ad, like the first 3 seconds is 80-90% of it. Like I want to tell this story because I think it'll help somebody in the audience. So good friend of mine, huge marketer back in the infomercial days, television. And he had done 2 or 3 home run infomercials and he recorded one with Larry King. All right. And so he flew Larry King out. He was going to interview him about his book. So it was like a big ego moment for him. He was like, hey, and tonight you're live with Larry King. And he just did it just like an episode of Larry King. And he ran the ad and it bombed. And he was like, I know this is a killer ad. Like, he's like, I've done this. I know this is a killer ad. Like, why isn't this working? So he went back, he watched all his best infomercials, and he realized that he just missed the hook. So he flew back the entire production crew, flew Larry King back to re-record the first minute. He re-recorded the first minute with the new script, did $100 million the next year. How people perceive the information matters almost more than the information itself. And this is what, like, zooming out a chunk, the reason I'm so big on this evidence shit is because that's the frame that people consume your message in. If I have a book that says how to market a book and it has 10 reviews on Amazon, do I need to consume the book? No, I already know the book sucks because I have evidence that the book sucks. I have visual proof that everything you're saying is not true or that you aren't even doing it, right? It's just like the teacher who says, I'm giving financial advice to people. And they're like, my advice is better than Warren Buffett's. It's like, yeah, sure. You just forgot to build an $800 billion company. No big deal. That's it. And so it's the lens, right? It's the lens that everyone's going to perceive everything you say through. And so like, I want people to have the evidence so that when they speak about something, they can be confident about it. Confident because they have a high degree of probability that it is true because they've experienced it.
Seeing you. No, I love it, man. I love it. Well, I have a million notes, dude, that this would go on for 8 hours. But I just saw recently another one flying through that I thought, I'm going to talk to him about this, even though it has nothing to do with anything else. Sure. What's the deal with never skipping dessert?
This is great. This will segue into something that I've been wanting to talk about.
Good.
So like I see the videos that are like the Hormozi content method, the 4 pillars of Alex Hormozi's brand. And they try to like ascribe marketing terms to like what we're doing. When in reality, we do none of that. I'm always curious. I'm like, oh, what are my pillars? And so like never skip dessert happened because I come from a fitness background and everyone in my early audience was fitness people. And they're always like, never skip Monday, never skip leg day. And I was like, fuck it, never skip dessert. You know what I mean? And so it was just counter to everything else. I just thought it was cute and funny because I like eating dessert and I still have a 6-pack. And so maybe there's another way to do it. And so anyways, the point was, it was just me being me, right? And then I had no idea it was it was just one time I did never skip dessert. And then like 50 people tagged me the next week with desserts and stuff. And so I think it was a relatively cute saying put around an event that people usually want to document anyways. When dessert comes and it's all fancy, like you want to take a picture of it, but you don't want to be that person. And it gave people permission to post something they wanted to post anyways. And so I think that's why those two things kind of combined. But for me, like somebody was like, so did you like think about the wife beater? And I was like, I get hot a lot. And so I wear wife beaters. Like I can work out in them. And like I can throw something on top if I get cold. You know what I mean? And I throw the flannels on that I have because they're really soft and comfortable. That's why I wear it. Like I wear the shorts that I wear because they can get wet. I can go to the gym and I can go to a nice restaurant in them. And I can keep my phone in my side pocket. And while I'm sitting down right now, without having to take it out of my pocket every time. I had one of my team ask me this. He was like, so what do you tell somebody who is boring? You're just like interesting. I was like, I don't think that's true. I think that people suppress themselves because they're afraid of other people's judgment. I think people would do more things that are more like them if they weren't afraid of looking different. But if the whole point, like the point isn't to stand out, the point is just do you. And because everyone else doesn't do them, you will stand out as a result. But it's more the outcome than it is the desired result.
Did you ever have that fear and you had to get over it, or have you you've never really worried about that and just always have done you?
No, of course I've had insecurities. I mean, I just think that over time, they just become less and less important. I mean, I think a lot about my 85-year-old self, good old Grandpa Alex. And I just think that guy doesn't give a fuck.
Yep.
And I'm just thinking, like, if that guy doesn't give a fuck then, I might as well not give a fuck now. Old people are happier than everyone else except for kids. It's a smile. You've probably seen the graph, the smiley face, where it's like you're happiest when you're a child, you're really miserable at 40, and then you become happy again at like 60-ish when you realize that like nothing mattered to begin with, right? And then you just do you, right? And so I was just like, if I'm going to come to that conclusion eventually anyways, I might as well just start now. And like I wear comfortable shoes that don't look cool. But if I'm going to do it when I'm 85, I might as well do it now. Like they don't care. They're not worried about it. They're like, I got a bunion. You know what I mean? Like shit hurts. I got to wear the nice soft shoes. Right. And I'm good with it. I'm just fine with it. I don't know. It just doesn't bug me.
But that's still against the grain. Most people do. They struggle with this. They think about that. I remember my dad, specifically this moment, I've shared it a lot. I'm getting ready for like this banquet or something. Yeah. And I'm like, do I wear these pants or these pants? He goes, they don't care about your pants. They care about their pants. And I just thought that part of it, as well as being worried about that. But you've come to this realization and able to act on it, which is even harder, sooner than most. How do you think you've done that?
I think about the fact that I'm going to die every day.
Really?
It's probably the thought that I think most frequently throughout the day.
Are you scared of that?
No.
Just the realization this is going to happen.
I'm going to die.
Yeah.
I could die tomorrow.
Yeah.
What a shame it would be if I cared about what pants. If I think about this, imagine I died tomorrow and I was wearing something really uncomfortable for this meeting. Wouldn't you be like, man, I can't believe, like, what a shame. He didn't do what he wanted to do. So like, as long as what you want to do is legal, right? And it's not hurting anybody. So to the point about patience, where I've been reinforced over and over again for being more and more patient, for figuring out things to do in the meantime, while my longer goals continue to compound. To the same degree, I have been reinforced for just doing me. And so maybe you need to take that first step of just maybe if you're just afraid to wear a hat, or maybe you like mustaches and you don't want to have a mustache. The first big thing I had was I had a huge handlebar for 5 years.
Yeah.
And that's weird. It was super weird. I looked like a porn star, like a 70s porn star. But like, I remember I was shaving one day and I came out of the bathroom and I looked at my wife and I was like, this is funny. And then the thing is like, it made my day bright. And so like every morning I'd wake up and I'd be like, I can't take myself that seriously. And I don't know, maybe I am more insecure than most people. And so this is just my visual reminder to myself to not care about. I don't know. But I will say that doing me, despite the fear of what other people will, quote, judge me for, and then surviving, living another day with their judgment or without their judgment. That's really just like the more evidence that I have that I can continue to live. Like to the dad example that you have, right? In my situation, my dad would be like, you're not going out like that, are you? And so like I had to at an early time just be like, I'm going to fucking do me. I don't want it like, and so I would say like my big breaking, right, as a human was when I was probably 20, 21, 22. And that's when I quit my job and I left, right? I left Baltimore. I left everything behind. And I think that was by far that was the scariest thing I'd ever done in my life. To this day has been the scariest thing I've ever done in my life was quitting my job. Because it wasn't just quitting my job. It was what quitting my job signified about everything else. It meant that everything that I had done at that point, I had been building this life that I didn't want to live. I was building a life that my dad wanted me to live to get his approval. And the thing is when my approval rating for my father was at its absolute highest, when I was my absolute saddest as a human being. And so when I left that job, I basically started from scratch and was like, well, what do I want to do? And I was like, well, I like fitness. I don't know, I'm going to figure that out. And he's like, what are you going to be, a personal trainer? You know what I mean? It's like you're a Vanderbilt grad. You graduated in 3 years. You had this white collar job on a fast track to go into a top Ivy League business school. He's like, you're set. As I was about to culminate in like the ultimate setness by his standard, I quit everything and started a gym, which is like, as a personal trainer, like a blue collar, not a very high income thing. And so I think being willing to die to him then was what allowed me to live to me. And my father's approval was the person whose opinion I cared the most about in the whole world. And so once I was able to not care about his opinion, no one else's opinion really came even close. You know what I mean? Like I was raised by a single father who's Middle Eastern. Like I had no siblings. I barely had a mother. And so like, imagine your brother, your mother, your sister, your uncle, all of the people that you used to care about their opinion, all in one person. And that person's approval made or broke your day, month, week, year. And like, that was my life. And my dad, God bless him, would always move the flag for what achievement was. So if I aced everything, he's like, you should have aced it faster. Like if I got a 99, it wasn't like, congrats on the A. The question was just, what did you get wrong? It was always like that. Like to the point that like, it's not weird for me to say that. It was just always like that. Like I was just used to that. I didn't know that other people's parents didn't do that. Right. And whoever that person is that I think you care the most about, their approval, is I think the person that you need to be willing to get disapproval from to do what you want to do. And to me, it felt like death. And the only way I was literally able to do this was because I didn't want to live anymore. And so I don't know how extreme of a circumstance other people are in. Some people probably aren't as dissatisfied as I was. I was incredibly sad. I was 21, 22, right? I'm at this point, I have a consulting job. I have my own condo. I'm successful by all means, by all, external means. And I'm going on my balcony every night and just thinking to myself, like, is this it? And always thinking that night, like, if I didn't wake up tomorrow, like I wouldn't be that upset. Like I wasn't like, I'm going to jump off this thing, but I was just like, if I didn't wake up, I'd be okay with it. And the more times I kept thinking that, I was like, dude, if you don't want to wake up, then fuck it. You know what I mean? Like if death is, if right now I basically felt like the Walking Dead, like if I feel like death, then whatever else is out there can't be worse than that. And so that was what I kept repeating to myself was like, sometimes you have to let his dreams die for yours to live. And they were mutually exclusive. Some people are like, you know what? They just want what's best for you. Fuck that. My dad did not, like he does long-term, but not for the first few years. Like he was not stoked. Like I was so afraid of my father that I literally drove across the country and called him when I was already halfway there to tell him that I left. So I didn't want him to convince me. He had a lot of influence over me. So I knew I had to change the environment. I had to change my conditions. And so like if you are in one of those states where it's like you feel paralyzed, it's usually because you have conditions that make it very difficult for you to leave. The easiest way to change behavior is to change your environment. And so I went to California. I went to the furthest place possible from Baltimore, Maryland. I went to Southern California. Like on a map, there's basically nothing that's further away from Baltimore, Maryland. And I went there and I didn't know anybody. One guy on the internet said I could stop by his gym. So I drove straight to this guy's gym. And I was like, hey, I'm here. And he's like, oh, where are you staying? I was like, I don't know yet. And he's like, what do you mean you don't know? I was like, I don't know, I just got here. And he was like, well, I got shit to do. I'm working. And I was like, okay. He's like, well, shit. He's like, you can stay at my place tonight, but you got to figure something. I was like, okay, thanks. So the next day, I went into the gym with him that morning and he just got on a chair and was like, hey, I got this kid. Who here can give him a room? One guy came up to me. I was like, I'll rent you a room. I rented a room for $400 a night or $400 a month from this guy in Chino. That's how, and like, I went from this top secret clearance, defense contracting, 3-year magna cum laude, Vanderbilt, ace my GMAT, all that, to sleeping in some random guys. I'm actually still friends with them. Some random guys' room because I was just like, I need a reset. The game that I was trying to win wasn't a game that I had designed. It was my dad's game. And so I was trying to win at my dad's game. And I just realized I didn't want to play that anymore.
What was that call like when you're driving across the country?
What was that? What was that car ride like?
The call, like you called your
Oh, the
dad after
call.
you're already on the way.
Ah, I mean, he was pissed. What was he going to do? You know, like,
Is he
I
still
mean,
alive?
my dad, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what's your relationship with him like now?
We're good. We're good. We're fine. I
I
mean,
mean,
he saw that it worked out. So he's good.
well, there's got to be more to it than that, man. I mean, this is obviously the most pivotal person in your life, and now you've gone from that. You quit. You left. You started anew, and then boom! Like
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what he's thinking. Like,
I'll tell you
how
the two
proud is he now?
conversations. Yeah, I'll tell you the two conversations that matter.
Okay.
So in the car ride, when I called him, he basically, I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go do this gym thing," and he was like, come over, like have lunch, we'll talk about it." Which he knew was like, "I'll talk you off the cliff." And like, because this was like a weekly cadence we had. I would say, "I don't want to do this anymore. I want to start my own business," and he'd be like, just it's fine, just follow the path, go to business school, get a business degree, and then you can do business later, like it's fine." And so that was just like the routine we were in. And I was like, "I can't." And he was like, "What do you mean you can't?" And I was like, "I'm in Ohio." And he was like, "What do you mean you're in Ohio?" And the tone changed. And he was like, "You're so unbalanced, you're so extreme, it's always all or nothing with you. This is ridiculous, you're throwing away your education, why did we do all this stuff?" And I was just like, "I'm not coming back." And so that was kind of it. And then we didn't talk much, occasional text here and there, but like, I'm alive. Still cared about me, but he didn't approve. Whatever you do when you have somebody who you absolutely love, because I know my father loves me to death, but completely didn't approve of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So that level of communication. We didn't talk about anything because anything we talk about, we get in a fight, right? So very short conversations. So fast forward 5 years, right? 6 years. I now have gym lunch, right? And we're past the losing everything part, right? I'm taking home $1 million plus a month in income. And so I get a call from my dad, and we haven't spoken much, right? And so I'm out to dinner with Layla and her parents in Michigan during the summer. And so I'm like, I got to take this. This is weird. He doesn't really call me out of the blue. So I answer the phone. I step outside. And I'm like, "What's up?" And he's like, "You're going to want to sit down for this." And I was like, either he has cancer or he's apologizing. That was it. Like literally I was like, okay. And he was like, "You ready?" And I was like, okay. And he was like, "I'm sorry." And I was like, huh? And I was like, "For what?" And he was like, "For everything, for all of it. You were right. This was a good path for you to take." He's like, "But for the record, if it had been in my time, I would have been right." And I should have taken it for what it was, because like in the culture that my father was brought up, like fathers don't apologize to sons ever. It just doesn't happen. And this was the first time my dad ever apologized. So I should have taken it for that, right? As like a really strong attempt at an olive branch. But I didn't. And I just remember saying, like, I stopped caring about what you thought 5 years ago when I packed the car and I left. And I was like, "So your apology doesn't really mean anything to me." I was like, "I got over what you thought a long time ago." I was like, "So I'm glad you're over it." And he was like, "Well, we'll see how long it lasts." So that was my kind of exchange with my dad at that point. And so obviously we're fine now. We've made amends. But like it had now been 5 or 6 years, right? And I had already gone through losing everything multiple times. And I had slept on the floor for that long period of time, right? I think there's a saying that says like every man becomes a man when his father dies. And I don't think your father has to die, obviously. But I think that your need for your father's approval has to die at some point. So either the person, like your need for their approval dies, or they physically die and there's no way you can get it again. And so I think that is what ultimately like unchains most people and then allows them to be their own man. And so I had, quote, been my own or become my own man when I was 21, 22. And after disappointing the man that I cared the most about in my entire life, comments on the internet, you know what I mean? Like you can hear in the tone of like how like Susie Q, who says that like She doesn't want to buy a gym membership. But one of the reasons that Layla and I have worked out really well is that Layla expects nothing from it. And she's never asked me to change. I mean, her expectation is that I keep being me. Now, me keep being me is I'm going to go for it. You know what I mean? But she's never tried to ask me to be less of who I am in order to be with her. And so she's always just been like, our relationship has been both of us wanting to go to this place, both walking in the same direction and being like, you want to walk together? And that's what's worked for us. I'm not saying that's I think most people won't find that, to be honest with you, because it's weird and it's not common.
You've written that for anyone debating whether to marry a partner, these two lenses were useful. One, how have my stats changed since they entered my life, which would be wealth, health, and time. That's for you. And two, would I go to war with them? I thought about that a lot with my own marriage. I thought, like, man, that's a really good point. And I think about a lot of the good things that have happened since Miranda has come into my life, my wife. And like, I like that, man. And it sounds like this is something that you think about. What about your stats and going to war and why that's so important for the person that you choose to spend your life with?
One, I like evidence.
Yeah.
That I've made a good decision. So that's where the stats come from. The war thing is more of a projecting into future situations. So it's kind of like a past for prediction of future, right? I didn't think about it that way when I was writing it, but I agree with it. I'm glad I still agree with past self. The war thing is I've got to want to go to war with this person, have them covering my 6, right? Shoulder to shoulder, et cetera, back to back. Because where I want to go, not many people have gone. And it's going to be, by its very nature, difficult and fraught with hardship. And so if someone wants a puffy life that I could give someone, you know what I mean? Then that's not going to be the person who's going to help me get to where I ultimately want to go. And where I want to ultimately go isn't really a place to who I want to become. And the place I want to go is just my mountain to climb in order to get there. But it's really more about my lungs being able to breathe at the top of the mountain than it is me being at the top of the mountain itself.
Do you think bigger than most people?
No, I think that I've achieved things earlier, and so then I set my goals to the next thing. It's because I've achieved a decent amount from a material perspective. I've just moved the goal line. I think that's really all it is. I don't really think I think particularly bigger. It's just that, like, if you're making 10 grand a month, then your next goal is 100. When you're making 10 million a month, your next goal is 100 million a month. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just moving zeros like everyone else is, but like I just checked the box off earlier.
But outside of money, and not just talking about that, I just mean like overall life. Like, think like you the extension of that is that you said they flow from what I want, which is growth, and 2 is hard goals. I need someone who can handle both of those things. So like hard goals are probably big goals or big things that you want. I'm just wondering if that's kind of the way you view it. Is I want something bigger. I want something harder. I want something more than what the average person wants. That's why I can't be partnered with the average person.
So I would say that the goals, again, are, so instead of saying I think bigger about the goals, it's like I want to be bigger.
Yeah.
As a person, as a human. And so if we define, like, how do you make someone patient? You put them through hard shit, right? How do you make someone who's tough? You put them through hard times. So if I want to have these character traits, then I have to vanquish big dragons and big monsters along the way. The bigger the monster, the more epic the hero. And so it's like, if you want to maximize the hero, then you got to go and slay big monsters. And so that's what I want. I want to maximize the hero in the story. I want to squeeze, like, my goal is to squeeze every fucking drop of potential that I've got out of me. And so I have to face big bosses. And that also means using whatever path I have behind me to try and predict the path I have before me. So I keep trying to do shit so I can prove to myself that I can do more.
Do you ever get tired from that, though? Do you ever just want to chill out and relax and say, God, I've been going hard for a while. I just want to chill out, man.
Macro, micro. Macro, no. Micro, sure. You know what I mean? Like,
how do you do that? How do you chill? How do you relax?
I'm a basic bitch when it comes to that stuff. Like, I'll pool day. You know what I mean? Like, I'll pool and drink margaritas. You know what I mean?
How do you eat dessert and drink margaritas and look like that?
Yeah, well, that's just counting your macros and knowing what you're doing. But the step 1, pick the right parents. Step 2, start training when you're 14. Step 3, go on tier T at age 30. I haven't done this as much because Layla doesn't like it as much, but I'll binge. I would love to just binge movies or TV. But usually for me, it's about a half day.
Yeah.
So it's like I can work 6.5 out of 7. And that's usually what it ends up being. 6.5 out of 7. I can work.
You work 6.5 out of 7 days. So
I can work 6.5 out of 7. Yeah.
yeah. Do you get to the point where you say, man, I made a lot. I'm flying private. I'm doing whatever I need to do. Maybe I can work 4.5 instead of 7 and enjoy more of this? Or is the work part of what you enjoy?
You got it.
Okay.
What would I do? I just want to I want to do epic shit. And
You're
so
doing what you want to do. And like in your free
exactly.
time, you're doing what you want to do.
Yeah. And that's so I get every once in a while work Twitter or lifestyle Twitter or whatever will come out and get really aggro about something that I say about work. But it's just because their definition of work and my definition of work are different. Like I define work as what I do every day. You know what I mean? And like, it just so happens to make money, but I enjoy the game. And so I just want to play the game as much as humanly possible because it has reinforced me for playing it. So I play as much of it as I possibly can until my work per unit of time drops. And then I hardcore relax. But for people who make sacrifices with their work, which I absolutely respect, if you don't like the job that you're in, but you need to because you've got people who are dependent on you, I think there's honor in that. And I think in some ways, like you can actually reframe your work again, because I'm big on perspectives. Like you can reframe the work into something you do enjoy. It's like, I enjoy providing for my family. Like this is what higher cause is there. But I don't need a break from the game unless I physically need a break from the game. And then I take one.
When you think about all the people in your life that you've surrounded yourself with, that you've been intentional to bring into your orbit, that you've attracted to your orbit, which are a lot of people who have made it happen. These are a lot of people who have sustained excellence over an extended period of time. What have you found to be some of the commonalities among those people?
They don't try and change me, and they want to grow. And that's about it.
That's about it?
Yeah. They got to want to grow. Like there's nothing that drives me more crazy. Well, one is if someone tries to change me, they're out. It's not oil and vinegar. It's not going to work.
What about people in your life who say,
than you try to change
do you have people in your life though who say, Alex, this is a bad idea. No, don't do this. Or, hey, maybe this way, like a kitchen cabinet, so to speak, to say, hey man, like, do you have those people
for sure.
Okay.
Well, there's a difference between like criticizing an idea or criticizing a way of living. So if someone's going to attack values, and that's like, I feel very strong about my values, but my ideas, loosely held. You know what I mean? This is my best.
Sure.
Like when we introduce an idea to the group, it's always like, this is my best bad idea. I'll say, love my idea for 5 seconds. And then I'll say it. And then it's like, oh, you can tear it apart. Right. But the growth, hey, I'd love to, grow my business. I'm like, cool, man. Like, you should do this. Then I see me a year later and I'm like, how'd that go? Like, oh, busy, man. A lot of stuff's been coming up. I'm like, yeah, sure has. And they're like, I've been meaning to pick your brain. I'm like, I don't think so. I think I already said everything I thought last time. I had that happen multiple times. They're like, I'd love to pick your brain. I was like, you already did. And I already gave you what I thought, and you haven't done it. So I was like, there's really no point in me repeating the same statements. Yeah. Do that, and we can talk.
What are your values?
Giving first, thinking long, having work itself be noble, trying to motivate off of reward, not punishment. I think truth in general, in all its various forms. But if I were to tell you the company's ones, it's competitive greatness, sincere candor, and unimpeachable character.
Which we haven't brought up, acquisition.com. I know we got to run in a second, but briefly, why start acquisition.com? Why was that the next step? And what exactly does acquisition.com do?
Yeah. Layla and I, from the exit, and we'd taken about $40 million out before the exit, we had enough money to start a family office. And so acquisition.com exists as our family office for investments. And while we still had some of the companies before our bigger exit, we had made 2 or 3 investments that worked out really well. And so we said, you know what? I think I want to do this. I think this is what I want to do. I want to go buy businesses, buy chains, buy brick and mortar stuff, buy normal consumer businesses or business services businesses, just normal businesses, and do what we do. And so we look for founders who are sincerely candorous. They tell the truth and can take the truth. They have unimpeachable character. We're proud to associate with them on and off the field. And they're competitively great. They want to go after the big hill. And they're not afraid of a hard challenge. And they revel in the hard challenge. They're eager to attack. Like that's what we're looking for. And so if we see founders who are doing, for us, the minimum is $1 million in EBITDA. The largest company we have is 20 million in EBITDA. So that's kind of the range. I think the median is probably 4 or 5. EBITDA being profit for anyone who's newer here, brought forward for profit. So we invest in those businesses, sometimes as a minority growth partner, sometimes as a majority. It just depends on the situation. And then our goal is to just hold and grow. But if the founder really wants to have a big exit, then we can optimize for that. But like for us, I'd rather just continue to grow tax free and grow the equity value and the enterprise value of the business. I don't need a liquidity event, but if they want one, then we can go optimize for that.
Love it, man. Where would you send, Alex, has been amazing. Where would you send my viewers and listeners to go to learn more about you online? I know you got a big thing coming up soon.
Oh, well, I'll give you two things. So one is we're always looking for talent. And if you're a leader, you're a manager, you have a valuable skill. We have 13 portfolio companies. I think we employ just under 1,000 people. We are always looking for talent. And just go to acquisition.com and you can click the careers tab and it has all of our job openings. And you can join Hormozi Talent, which I think twice a month we do like, I don't want to say like a job drop, but we basically let everybody on there know what new leadership roles we have coming first. Like we only recruit leadership roles at the holding company. The portfolio companies recruit the smaller roles from directly. And then if you're trying to get more leads, my second book, $100 million Leads, is coming out. And I have a live event. Right now we have 360,000 people who are registered for the live event, which is pretty wild. And so you can go to acquisition.com/leads and show there live. It's on August 19th on Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific. It's going to be a show.
Is that your birthday?
The 18th is.
18th. Okay.
So I did it the day after. Yeah.
Good way to celebrate, man. It's awesome.
Yeah. If it goes well, otherwise it'll be a terrible birthday.
Oh, I love it, man. Well, I super appreciative of your time, man. It was great to catch up. I obviously been binging your stuff for a while, and I'm very appreciative of you. And I'd love to continue our dialogue as we both progress, man.
Appreciate you. Thank you, man.
Thanks, man.
And thank you to the audience. Hopefully you got something from it.
Love it.